everyone. This is Cellular Healing TV. I'm Ashley Smith. Today, Dr. Pompa will be talking all about the benefits of molecular hydrogen with his guest, Alex Tarnava, the developer of the first oral stable hydrogen supplement that you can add directly to your drinking water. Alex learned through many trials how to trap hydrogen in an open cup, which allows us as consumers to reap the benefits of supplemental H2. They will discuss how hydrogen assists in fasting, shows promise in anti-aging, encourages post-workout recovery, and mitigates oxidative stress, inflammation, and many other triggers for disease and imbalance. But first, I'd like to share a bit more about Alex Tarnava. Alex has a passion for health and fitness, learning, and self-improvement, and was shocked to find he developed osteoarthritis while still in his physical prime. Searching for alternatives to pharmaceuticals, Alex happened upon the potential of molecular hydrogen. Finding no products with the hydrogen saturation he knew was necessary for results, Alex began to experiment with ways of replicating the dosage levels being successfully used across the scientific community. After much trial and error, his oral stable hydrogen was born. Curious to try molecular hydrogen for yourself? Dr. Pompa recommends supplementing with Fastonic, which is aligned with the research and development discussed in this show. We are offering 10% off for our CHTV audience at getfastonic.com. Also, to the practitioners out there who cannot make it to our November Live It to Lead It event in Las Vegas, you can still join us by subscribing to our live stream and virtually attend our 3-day workshop that will give you the latest in cutting-edge treatments and strategies to build your practice. Please go to HCF events for live stream access, and you can use the code CHTV to take 10% off the price. That's hcfevents.com with the code CHTV. Hope you can join us. So let's get started and welcome Dr. Pompa and Alex Tarnava to this show dedicated to molecular hydrogen. This is Cellular Healing TV.
Hey, welcome to Cell TV. This is a really exciting episode because you all love these episodes where I bring you these new exciting technologies and products that I take myself and I feel you all need to know about. Hydrogen's this topic today. And I'll tell you, I just got off a mindset. It was 12 of some of the most brilliant people in our industry. It was me, Dr. McCullough, Tyler LeBaron, who I actually interviewed on the show about hydrogen, and several other doctors, my friend Ben Greenfield. So we had PhDs, some scientists, and we had clinicians that I feel are leading the way and some of the exciting things that are happening in healthcare right now. And I'll tell you, we were 2 days of this mind share, as we call it, and hydrogen was one of the big topics that we were all sharing ideas about. We were all sharing our clinical experience about hydrogen, and we were all talking about the different effects on the biochemistry and perhaps why we're seeing the results what we're seeing. And Dr. McCullough shared some great stuff, some of his thoughts, and a lot of the practitioners' room shared their thoughts. We even had a guy that I know, my guest, Alex, I'm going to introduce you here too in a second, knows very well, Bob Slovak. He talked a lot about hydrogen. He's been dealing with this for many years. So we had a lot of incredible feedback on this topic, and I'm excited to bring Alex. You are at least one of the developers and the developer of this new hydrogen, this oral stable hydrogen that we're able to just put in a cup of water and drink. And I have to admit, the old days we were trapping hydrogen, sealing it in bottles and all these complicated things. And Alex, you made it simpler for us. So first of all, thank you. And thanks for being on the show.
No problem. And I just want to say first and foremost, I mean, that's how I started with hydrogen too. You know, that was everything in our R&D was how to trap it, get more hydrogen quicker and trap it. The open cup design was actually an accident.
Wow, I didn't know that. Matter of fact, I asked that this weekend, and nobody actually knew how you ended up coming up with that.
Yeah, it was a complete accident. As we were trying to get, higher levels of hydrogen saturation quicker, we started realizing as we went higher, we're actually getting lower hydrogen, and we're seeing this whiteout. Because basically the reaction, once we'd open the sealed container, would react so much extra hydrogen, something called Le Chatelier's principle, and it would sparge out the hydrogen we just saturated. So it was kind of a weird phenomenon happening that led us to months and months of R&D and replication and figuring out what was going on to realize, well, if we're doing this like this, we could make it in an open cup as long as we basically maximize the reaction and dissolution kinetics, which is how we led to our discovery. And it reminds me of a quote I quite like by Isaac Asimov that said, in science, so often, the findings that herald in, new revelations to discoveries aren't met with eureka, I found it, but well, that's funny.
Yeah.
It's the things that you don't understand at first.
Yeah. No, it's so true. Honestly, I could look back at some of my own discoveries clinically and go, that's funny. Wonder why that happened. Or is that good? And then out of it, came some incredible things. So it shouldn't surprise me. Let's back up a second, because maybe some of our viewers or listeners didn't see the shows I've done on hydrogen. And as a matter of fact, I'll make sure Ashley, my team member here, gives us what episodes those are, because you should go back and watch. I interviewed Tyler LeBaron on the hydrogen, and he gave some great studies. And I think I want to expand upon it today, because I think it's a topic that we know all about. I mean, look, you put 12 of us clinicians and scientists, I believe top in the world, in a room together, and hydrogen was a big topic of that. We're on to something really exciting. Okay, so hydrogen, I mean, the smallest molecule on the periodic table, smallest element, so we know it can cross into membranes, but who cares? Why, when I'm watching a show, I want to know, how does this benefit me? How can this help me? And I know we don't want to make claims or things like that. We want to be careful, but what is the hydrogen rage about?
Hydrogen, what really, strikes me, and what originally interested me in hydrogen, probably isn't as true now, but actually what we found out about it is even cooler, which is, surprising. So it's really neat for me to see how many people are talking about hydrogen now, because when I first heard about it about a decade ago, about a year after that first Nature Med article came out showing it was a selective free radical scavenger for, the hydroxyl radical, I thought that was awesome, because I had just been sort of following Aubrey Gray.
Let me just bring that to logic for people what that means. There's a nasty free radical called a hydroxyl free radical. It's considered to be the most damaging, dangerous, free radical that we know of. And hydrogen, really gets rid of this, to put it in the simplest terms if I can, and it makes people feel better. Okay, go ahead.
Exactly, right? So for so long, we thought the answer was antioxidants, because it's all these reactive oxygen species that are wreaking so much havoc on our bodies. But antioxidant therapy just wasn't going anywhere. It doesn't get to the mitochondria. It doesn't take out the bad guys. It takes out the good guys. It causes imbalances. It was really a dead end. So when I saw that about hydrogen, I got really interested, but there was nowhere to get it. And years went by. I was young. I was healthy. I forgot about it until I got pretty injured and sick. And
that's always the way it is.
Yeah. And I was desperately just searching PubMed all the time to look for anything to help with my afflictions, and hydrogen kept on popping up, and I'd remembered it. And so I started following along, and then I still couldn't get any commercial products. And I decided, well, if no one's going to make this stuff, I'm going to figure out how to make it. And now we're figuring out more and more.
By the way, when your name came up this weekend, that was what people said. Look, this guy just figured it out. He was dead set. He was, just resolve in that he's going to figure this hydrogen thing out, and he did. And two people in the room said, "Man, that guy impressed me with that," and we take our hat off to him. So they hold you high.
That's good to hear. I mean, if I, would say anything, it's more obsession, and there was a lot of minds.
That's me.
A lot of minds working on this. I mean, I'm not some, genius that sat here and figured out everything. on my own. Like when I started, I realized there's only so much knowledge one person can have. So I partnered, with my founding partner, Dr. Holland. He's a medicinal PhD chemist. I hired a physicist. I hired an engineer, right? I started working with a biochemist. I started working with manufacturers because we figured out the chemistry in a month, right? But then it was 15 failed scale-up attempts and 1,000 iterations before we got our first production-ready tablet. It's very different to make one in a mortar and pestle than to make a million, right? There's so many issues with scaling up with this kind of thing. So I quickly started realizing, and I actually became the formulator for excipients and everything myself, because that was actually the trickiest part. I read every publication there is on pharmaceutical formulation science to figure out what's going on, how to do this, how to do that. Kept pieces of paper in the middle of the night, on my table, so that if something came to me as I woke up, I walked and wrote it down. And I just kind of acted like the quarterback of everything. I'd speak to, the chemist and figure out what was going on with chemistry, but not bring any of the manufacturing or the engineering or the physics or anything, or the excipients. And then I'd go and talk to each individual person and get, in layman's terms, their thoughts on what was going on with their specific issue. And I just started putting it together like a puzzle.
Right. That's awesome.
It's impossible that I could have done it alone. Right. So, and I just kind of learned that strategy from a book of Ray Kurzweil's, if you know who that is. He talked about how we're so desperately in need of like PhDs in general science that can sit in these summits and listen to everyone from every specialty and figure out what's going on, because nobody can talk to each other.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what the other person's working on, because the way knowledge is going is everything is so specialized.
By the way, that was the point of this weekend. We do this a couple times a year where we bring, all of us together who are doing amazing things clinically from the scientific perspective, and we share. We literally just share everything that each other are doing for the reason you just said it. I'm telling you, Alex, every time we do it, amazing transformation things happen. We come out with things that make a difference in the world and people's health. That's the way it works. You're right on the money with that. It's a strategy that really, because the way medicine works today and science, nobody is sharing ideas. And when we do, magic happens. So
and it's so hard for most of them too, because when you're talking to people who are only talking about your thing, even you explained about the hydroxyl radical. I mean, you forget what other people don't know. When you talk about something all day, every day, it's so hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes to know, well, I've been talking about this for years, every day. So of course everyone else knows about it. And that's just not the case. And you see it so often when you try and, share with someone, educate someone, their eyes just glaze over. And it's because of my issue or someone else's issue with communicating, because we're not putting ourselves in someone else's shoes. And that's not just true with the general population. That's true with other people working in science, with medical doctors, with all sorts of doctors, right? If you don't explain things in layman's terms so that to give someone a chance to understand, they're not going to have input. And now they can't combine it with what they know.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, hopefully we do that today, man. We got to, because believe me, there's people watching this that will hear this and they will apply it, and they'll apply it to a whole new level. It happens all the time, actually, on the show. Well, look, okay, you had said something really profound. You basically made a comment that, look, this isn't we know that all these diseases today are caused by inflammation, but hydrogen's not an anti-inflammatory, or it doesn't work that way. Matter of fact, I like to call it a redox molecule, where it doesn't push antioxidant and it doesn't push oxidation. It brings homeostasis or balance to the body. Kind of explain that, because that's a really important part here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what a lot of people don't realize is we need inflammation. Inflammation isn't bad. I mean, inflammation is how we protect ourselves from injury, our immune system. It all runs on inflammation. We need it, but what we need is a balance, right? So hydrogen isn't an anti-inflammatory. In fact, in some senses, it can increase inflammation.
Absolutely.
What hydrogen does is it regulates production of our pro-inflammatory cytokines, or these tiny little proteins that lead to the development of inflammation. So hydrogen kind of goes around, playing around with dials in our body and just up and down, regulating, turning up the dial, down the dial to find this balance, which is what we need. So I know in talking to some researchers, they say one of the amazing things about hydrogen, if you take a healthy cell and you put a hydrogen-rich medium on it, nothing happens. Nothing goes up, nothing goes down. The cell's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
If you then take that cell and you artificially damage it, now you see all these gene expressions changing, these up and down and all sorts of markers, because hydrogen is trying to desperately balance everything.
Right.
To make sure everything's working properly.
But by the way, one of the things, we had noted using hydrogen during a fast. We do a lot of fasting in our protocols, and a lot of people, because they're sick, right? They build up a lot of hydroxy radicals that we said in the very beginning that hydrogen has a really positive effect on. There's a lot of other things that happen during a fast, but we don't like giving things during a fast because we don't want to push the body left or right. We don't want to push the body direction. We want to rely on the innate intelligence. And that's where we came to the conclusion that hydrogen is perfect during a fast because it doesn't force the body. It relies on the innate intelligence. If it needs oxidation, it brings it. If it needs inflammation, it brings it. If it needs reduction, it brings that. So it becomes the perfect fasting thing. And clinically, it's been a savior for us, Alex. I mean, so when I contacted you about putting it, in a product, that's how we came up with Fastonic. There it is, Fastonic. Hence the word, because all of these doctors now, we're using it in our protocols in this way. Look, I have to ask you this question. I mean, when I started doing research on fasting, you probably know the answer to this. How many studies have been done on hydrogen? I mean, it's a round number, at least close.
Human or
both animal and human. Both animal and human.
So there's just under 40 human studies right now, with I think about as many underway, and there's over 1,000 publications on hydrogen. But that includes like hypothesis articles, opinion papers that have been published, everything like that. I think there's around 700 in animal and in vitro and human combined, but there's well over 1,000 total publications.
I mean, if I just look down a list here that I have, and by the way, some of these were done with medications, but these are positive outcome studies, no doubt many of them were done with medications, so we can't make claims exactly, but these are positive outcome studies.
That's the cool thing about hydrogen is in a lot of these studies, they are using, the traditional medication for disease or recovery, and they're using hydrogen to either lower the dosage or ameliorate the negative consequences of the dosage, like radiotherapy. They use hydrogen in conjunction to reduce the oxidative stress and the damages from radiotherapy in cancer patients, right? It wasn't actually to deal with the cancer, it was to deal with the side effect of the treatment.
Yeah. Well, there's one of the studies. There's one on rheumatoid arthritis, Parkinson's. There's one on body composition. Tons of studies here on metabolism, meaning obviously it has a potential effect on weight loss or weight loss resistance, tissue injury, mitochondrial, inflammatory myopathies. I mean, I'm just going down a list here, folks. I mean, literally, that's how many studies are here. Wrinkles. I mean, it's psoriasis. I mean, there's a long list, but you get the point. Is Alex, how can one molecule affect? And again, I'm reading down a list of studies. How can one molecule affect so many different conditions positively?
Well, it all comes down to gene expression, and we've probably all heard that saying, it's in your genes, right? What matters is in your genes. Well, that's only partly true. What matters is how your genes express themselves. And as we accumulate all these damages over time, our genes start expressing themselves differently. As our inflammatory bodies are dysregulated. We have too much, too little. As our redox is dysregulated, we have too much oxidative stress or too little. As we accumulate advanced glycation end products, as our telomeres start shortening, our gene expression changes, right? All of this happens, and they all kind of go around in a circle, that any of these can cause the other, and then we just start falling apart. I like to think of hydrogen as taking care of a car that's kind of falling apart, and the timing's always off. Every bump you go over, the timing's off.
Yeah.
Right? Your car starts sputtering, your gas mileage is bad.
And the older we get, the more the older we get, the more the dang timing keeps going off, by the way.
And like, say this car, you can't get the part. You can't get the bolt to tighten the timing. Maybe the casing's broken. So every time you go to drive, hydrogen is like popping your hood and adjusting your timing to hear it purr just right. You're still going to go over bumps. Your timing is still going to get knocked off, but it's like periodically adjusting it to hear that purr. So you're purring just right for a little bit while longer. And hydrogen goes around and it just kind of moderates things. It adjusts this here, adjusts that there. So it can have a lot of benefit for a lot of different things, but that's why it's so neat as being kind of like an adjunct therapy in a lot of these trials on top of the proven medication, because hydrogen's coming along on side and it's helping with this, helping with that, helping along the way.
And by the way, I mean, as more alternative practitioners, we find the same with our supplement protocols, right? It's like, you know, because I'm asked that question a lot by the docs. It's like, well, can I use it with this? Can I use it with this protocol? I'm like, look, you have to understand, hydrogen, it brings the body to homeostasis. It just makes everything you're doing work actually better because of the reason you're saying.
Absolutely. And a lot of people forget this about some supplements sometimes. I mean, there's, been talks about, like, say, studying like omega-3s in people who eat lots of fish. Well, it's about balancing your omega-3s to 6s. So if you're already in a good balance, an omega-3 supplement might not help. But the people who need an omega-3 are people who aren't eating fish, right? Aren't eating seeds, aren't getting enough of them, because it's about balancing your levels.
Mm-hmm. And the other cool part about this not being an antioxidant, an anti-inflammatory, or a oxidant in a sense, like ozone's an oxidant, has amazing capabilities, and it helps many people with many conditions. But the cool thing about hydrogen is you can't I'm always asking, like, well, how can you take too much? Your body just won't use it if it doesn't need it.
Yeah, I mean, hydrogen doesn't last long. I mean, I think when you take in hydrogen, it's gone out of your system within 5 minutes to 30 minutes.
Right.
And we look at, say, the amount of hydrogen that's used in something like deep sea diving and hydreliox, I think it's called, that they use a lot of hydrogen instead of nitrogen for deep sea diving. They'll use 1,000 times the level of hydrogen that we're delivering. The safety of hydrogen is so well established.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we can produce up to 10 liters of hydrogen a day from, bacterial production, in our stomach and intestines. So that's one of the neat things about hydrogen is how delivering such a small dose can have such a huge impact. And it could really come down to where all the benefits is in adjusting gene expression is we need that high dose intermittent blast, right? So we're producing hydrogen all day long, slowly in our stomach. Every time we eat fiber, every time we eat carbohydrates, we're producing hydrogen. Well, getting that glass of hydrogen water, right, or blast of hydrogen, it's just that big blast that knocks everything right.
Right.
Because our body doesn't have a tolerance that daily production.
It's kind of like getting stem cells, when people produce stem cells all the time, right? And when we fast, we even produce more. Matter of fact, part of the magic of fasting,
not long ago, actually.
Yeah, you produce a lot of stem cells during a fast. However, when you get an injection of stem cells, it's even this bigger blast, and boom, it strikes up healing. So it's kind of similar in that net. No, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I read a study on. I know we have a lot of athletes that watch the show as well, and how it obviously helps recovery, which therefore helps performance. Is it just a complete, Why is it? I mean, how can that be?
There's about as much study for humans on hydrogen, like in sports performance as anything. There's a lot of study on hydrogen for athletic performance. In fact, we just had a clinical study that was just presented at ACSM, American College of Sports Medicine, back beginning in June. And it showed in middle-aged overweight women a pretty dramatic increase, I think about 8% increase in VO2 max, but then about a 50% increase in time to exhaustion and work completed at the end of a 28-day double.
I'm looking at the study, 28-day hydrogen-rich water capacity on middle-aged overweight women.
Yeah, so they had pretty dramatic improvements. And in talking with that research team, I had some thoughts on it, and they agreed completely that they don't think hydrogen was actually increasing VO2 max, which I'd agree with. It was helping people work out harder and longer and then recover quicker. So these women were improving their own VO2 max by the end of the study from being able to train longer and harder and then recover quicker.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And, I brought that up because I know those who are not athletes watching this, if you're not feeling well or sick, I always say if it works for athletes recovering, it works for the sick as well. It's because, matter of fact, it's the opposite. Typically athletes have trouble feeling things because they're functioning at a much higher level than, would a sick person. It's really cool when you have something that really dramatically affects the athlete. Darn well it's going to affect the sick person struggling. So especially because they're not recovering, they're not healing the same way as an athlete.
Exactly. And I can talk a bit anecdotally about myself, and actually this ties into our second clinical trial that's also a single use athletic performance. And I can't fully discuss the results because it's still going through peer review, but it was a pretty big improvement in submaximal heart rate. And I noticed that when I take a massive dose of hydrogen before a cardio workout.
How much is that? What do you call massive dose?
I drop like 5 tablets in a half liter.
Yeah, so that's what I was just gonna say, because you're looking at about 1 tablet. Okay, so
yeah. So when I do this workout, what usually the time frame, intensity, everything that I'm usually at about 155 to 160 heart rate, I stay at 120.
Wow.
After taking the hydrogen, and my muscles don't get as sore. I don't get as tired. I'm still sweating buckets, but my heart isn't going.
My son, who works out at a high rate, he said, Dad, when I take the hydrogen, I don't get sore. I can crush it. I can take time off. That's how much it clears lactic acid.
And that was one of the first things when I started taking hydrogen. I was still recreationally, doing small competitions and CrossFit and everything. And I found it wouldn't help me on round 1. My performance wouldn't be better on the first workout, but I was doing a lot more reps in workout 2, 3, 4, 5 in a day than I was without hydrogen. And then after that, I didn't get that deep, like especially in your legs, that deep where you can't sleep, you're so sore, you're stiff. My legs were still tired. If I tried to go, say, do a workout the next day, they were tired. They were weak, but they weren't that stiff, sore, your legs are going to fall off pain. And it just so dramatically reduced my pain. And any athlete knows what I'm talking about, where you stare at the toilet and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Or you stare at stairs and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to get up.
Right.
Hydrogen got rid of that. You were still weak. You still needed recovery, but you weren't incapacitated.
Study that I read looked at hydrogen. Matter of fact, I think it was after I heard Tyler LeBaron speak at one of my seminars on hydrogen. And he talked about how this particular study, it mimicked caloric restriction, et cetera. And I'm thinking, well, gosh, if it does that, this may be good for, weight loss which it is good for weight loss, but it may be good for fasting. And then it was something else that he said. And that's what made our doctor group say, I bet this is magic for fasting. And that's where it all started. So that study, do you know that study where it talked about that? Do you know?
I'm trying to remember. I know there's a few that I thought would be pertinent to fasting. I get jumbled sometimes because I've read every study that's published now, so I forget which one is which sometimes. But
yeah, I know. I appreciate that.
There's definitely some, like there was one on like a growth factor that could have been pertinent. There was one on PGC1 alpha. There's shown like balancing blood sugar, which I know would be really important in fasting.
All of it.
I was speaking to one researcher that thinks a lot of this stuff, especially like the heart rate and everything, probably comes back to what it does to the brain. You know, and we look at a lot of these studies on hydrogen for cognitive function in the elderly, and then we look at how is it changing our heart rate so dramatically? How is it doing all of these things? And it could just all come back to the brain and how we're maybe processing energy. I mean, there's going to be people who can speak to that a lot better than I can. So I'm relaying some of this stuff.
No, exactly. We've noticed it clinically.
I can tell you, say, the burst in energy I get from hydrogen. Say, I don't always intermittently fast, and sometimes when I do, it's by accident because I'm working, a 16-hour day. I take a hydrogen and I'm just perked right up. Yeah. My energy is higher, especially traveling, jet lag. Drinking hydrogen when I get off the plane, it is better than coffee for sure. It's different, a lot different. You're just alert, focused, and that's one of the things I find when I intermittently fast is until you get your calories right, what you're eating right to go through the day and get used to it, your brain is clouded.
Yeah. Well, it
clears my brain when I'm not.
I know one of the studies, there's maybe even more than that, has to do with ghrelin. And ghrelin's the ghrelin leptin. Ghrelin communicates directly to your hypothalamus, right to your brain, to your practitioner's point. Yeah. And it has a very close relationship with leptin, with both control hunger, both control fat burning. It most likely has something to do with that hormonal cascade that actually starts in the gut. And I just don't know that we figured it out yet, honestly. But we know that it affects ghrelin, which we know that it affects leptin, and we know that it affects the brain. So there's something.
That's actually an older study. We've known that one for a while longer, and I think they've replicated that one too. Yeah. Showing,
so there's something magical happening there for sure. So it's like, it's pretty remarkable. I guess again, I mean, all these studies done on weight loss, metabolism. I mean, it's playing a role in that ghrelin pathway, metabolism pathway, hormonal pathway somehow. So,
yeah, no, absolutely.
Now, I watched a video on YouTube, and there is 2 mice, and it was basically, I believe that they were, I'm going to say Parkinson's. I think it was Parkinson's. Maybe you can recall. And they gave one. They were basically like running in circles. And they were Parkinson's mice, and they gave the one hydrogen, and it immediately, literally immediately stopped and was like normalized. Now, I doubt it lasted, but it showed that effect immediately on the brain. Have you seen that? Did you see that video?
I haven't, no, but that's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. What did I see that? I think Tyler showed it at my seminar, and then I looked it up after that. So, it just popped into my mind, or I would have pulled it up before the show here. And
I want to see that. It's interesting. And I've learned so many things about hydrogen, and it just speaks again to that analogy of that old car that every time you drive it, you need to find the timing, right, to get it.
But here's many of our viewers, you're aging yourself because they have no idea that cars can go out of timing. Okay, so I've heard you give a different example for perhaps the younger generation might relate to me. This example is important because this hydrogen thing is kind of hard to grip. I think you need examples. It was about the lighted path.
Okay, yeah. So basically, this is an analogy about how hydrogen balances, say, our inflammation. And if you imagine, inflammation like a flame, and you think of this path through an icy, snowy park in the middle of the wintertime. And the flames keep the path clear, keeps it warm, lit, so you can walk safely and get from point A to point B. Now, when inflammation goes out of control, what happens is those fires are covering the pathway. Now you can't walk through, right? So the fire is bad, right? Instead of it being your protector, it's a bad thing.
Right.
And then so often the response, for a lot of, drugs is to shut down the fire. Well, what happens if you shut down the fire is the ice freezes over. Now you can't pass.
Right.
Or let's cover the fire with a bunch of water and foam. Now it's slippery. It's a mess. You still can't pass. Well, hydrogen's like going over to the dial and just turning down the flame. Right? Now the flame is that nice, pleasant, warming fire that gives you light and clears the snow and the ice on the path. And hydrogen does this for a lot of things, not just inflammation. So hydrogen isn't an anti-inflammatory, right? It just balances the production of what leads to our inflammation. And it's the same thing with the antioxidants. Hydrogen isn't like an exogenous antioxidant, like a vitamin C that you just take and goes in and indiscriminately, reacts with just the good and the bad guys, because we have good oxidative species. Nitric oxide is a free radical, right? We need it. I mean, a lot of drugs rely on controlling nitric oxide. I mean, Viagra, Viagra, and now not just Viagra for the common uses, but we're looking at it for the heart and all these things. So hydrogen, basically, it just goes in there and it adjusts production of our endogenous. So those are ones we create internally of our antioxidants, and it only does this to a balance. So it's just, again, tweaking with it. So we're producing the right amount of glutathione, superoxide dismutase, catalase to deal with our own body.
Yeah, we've learned so much, I would say from a clinical perspective as well as, from a scientific perspective, that, the world was antioxidant crazy for a while. We realized people that take more antioxidants, it actually can lead to cancer and other problems. Lack of energy, for example, because we need inflammation, as you pointed out. But yet, if you take too many things that create oxidation, you can drive inflammation. And too much of that, to your point, is the fire burning around the path, right? And it's like, and that's not good either. So, yeah, I mean, that is the cool thing. I think the new science is redox, meaning the balance between oxidation and reduction, meaning inflammation, in driving the right amount of inflammation that our bodies need for a good immune system, good energy production, et cetera. So, yeah, I mean, that is it. Well, you said in the beginning that you got into this because of your own battle. What did you go through, and how did it help you?
So basically, I was that guy that was always doing something. I mean, to give you context, my common law, spouse right now, she talks about how when we first started dating, that she was talking to her friends saying, it might not work out. I'm too fit and athletic for her. Well, she ran, she won 3 CIS golds at nationals for cross country in Canada, Canadian Intramural Sports, and just qualified for like the Boston Marathon on her first marathon attempt. She is crazy fit and athletic, but I was training 6-7 times a week, sometimes 6 hours a day. I was doing martial arts, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu. I was doing CrossFit. I was doing workout competitions for fun that were different from CrossFit. I was then going on hikes. I was doing all this crazy stuff. And all of a sudden I got really sick. Mm-hmm. Now we're talking, I woke up one day and I had no explosive movement in my body. I went from, say, having like a 54-inch plyometric jump onto a box to I couldn't jump onto a plate.
Yeah.
Right. And it was bizarre because my slow movement, lifts, like say a deadlift, a squat, a bench press, they were unaffected. I was lifting the same amount of weight, but I had no explosive movement. I had no like lower coordination. I couldn't catch a ball properly. And I was sleeping close to, 16, 18 hours a day and had developed, almost narcolepsy. I was falling asleep sitting on a couch if I wasn't doing anything just for a couple minutes. Now, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. It must have been some sort of virus because my best friend at the time, he was training for a triathlon, and again, like a very high-end athlete, finishing top fives in like Spartan races, if you know what those are. They're obstacle course races.
Yeah, my friend Ben Greenfield does them all the time.
Yeah. So I mean, he's top five in the sprints and the beasts, locally, and he missed 3 weeks of work and was hospitalized twice with pneumonia as a 29-year-old competing for a triathlon. It hit me different. I couldn't really move. I was tired. I was out of it, and they were doing blood tests like twice a week on me. Mm-hmm. And at first, my C-reactive protein was at like 34, which shouldn't really be above 3. And,
right.
I forget what the units are of like milligrams per milliliter or something like that. But the number was 34. It shouldn't have been 3. And I was also, like seriously, anemic, and like that. All these issues were going on, and they didn't know why. Right? Everything was coming back clear, and it lasted about 3 weeks. And all of a sudden, I dropped below 1 on my CRP. Whatever it was cleared. But when it cleared, my joint stiffened. I developed osteoarthritis in my left shoulder.
Wow.
Right? And like moderate osteoarthritis in the matter of a month. My shoulder was just throbbing and aching. I went from being super flexible to I couldn't get into a butterfly position on the ground. I couldn't touch my feet and put my knees to the ground, and for someone that had been doing jiu-jitsu for years, couldn't do anything, couldn't move my head. I couldn't throw a kick, right? My hips wouldn't turn over. So everything seized up, and that's when I got really desperate. And that's when I was searching for things, and hydrogen kept on cropping up, and I wasn't getting better. And the doctors had me on 1,000 milligrams of naproxen a day. And then I gave myself an ulcer. And I was still trying to train, and I fainted 3 times in a week because I had ulcers. And I bought an ionizer. I won't say the brand, but I thought I spent like $4,500 on this ionizer to make hydrogen, and it wasn't working. And then I just thought to myself, how do I even know there's hydrogen in this?
Right. So at that point, you had actually started researching hydrogen. You were already sniffing down this road. Actually.
Yeah, I was. I knew naproxen wasn't a long-term solution. So right when kind of they said, here's 1,000 milligrams a day, I started looking, okay, what's going to be a long-term solution for me? Because I can't take 1,000 milligrams of naproxen a day for the rest of my life.
Right.
And I'm not really a candidate for surgery or joint replacement. At the time, I was like 29 years old. They won't do it until you're 65, and I'd never be training properly again anyways. So I was sniffing down hydrogen, and then it wasn't working. I wasn't getting better. And that's when I found out about the H2 Blue, the test reagent. And I'm like, well, I'm going to test this ionizer. And I was having to triple the volume.
What he's talking about, folks, is you can literally, in the water, when we put Fastonic in water, I can use this and test it and go, there's hydrogen. This is real.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this isn't mythical, right? Because you put it in there, it's like, is it really in there? Right? It is.
Yeah. So I mean, with the Fastonic, maybe with what we're doing to get the quasi-saturated nanobubbles of hydrogen that stay relatively stable in suspension, you might drop 90 drops in half a liter of water. Between 80 to 100 drops in, right? That's how much hydrogen you're getting, delivered to people. Whereas with this ionizer, I had to triple the volume of water to get 1 drop.
Wow. Yeah.
So it just didn't have hydrogen. And then to me, that actually, instead of feeling ripped off, I felt great because I'm like, well, hydrogen's not a dead end. I'm not getting it. And that's when I started actually buying the full articles, from research teams. I'm like, well, the scientists are making hydrogen. How are they doing it?
Right.
And so I started looking at the methods, looking at all the ways to get the hydrogen in the water, and basically turned into kind of the kitchen chemist and started doing it on my own. Now, after a while of doing that, I had a bit of a sober second thought, and I said, I'm pretty, adept at learning new skills and following instructions and being creative. But I said, nothing really beats expertise. I want to make sure that I'm not doing anything dangerous to myself. And that's when I found my partner, Dr. Holland, and I basically showed him all the chemistry I'd done, showed him the formulation, showed him what I was trying to do. And at first he said it was the worst pseudoscience he'd ever heard in his life. And he's from England. So, I think a English accent, saying this is, hocus pocus magic, right? Like, I won't talk to you. So I gave him, a dozen of the better studies that existed on hydrogen, 4 years ago at the time, and kind of rebutted his points and saying, I understand what you're saying here, and this is what we're doing and all this thing. And he got back to me and said, well, there certainly seems to be some evidence on this. Okay, I'll take a look at what you're doing. And he took a look, and I kept on sending him one study every day, one study after day, one study after day, as he was looking at my work. And it was just a little bit, serendipitous that I didn't know he'd taken a new role on a company that was looking for a cure on Hep B. And I sent him the study with hydrogen and Hep B.
Yeah.
And he called me for lunch, and he basically said, listen, I had to trust the scientists on all these other studies because it really isn't my specialty. But unless this data is frauded, this works. Like, we need to get this out to the population. Are you looking for a partner?
Wow, that's how it happened, man. Yeah, it transformed your life, and now millions of others. It wasn't, but I would say 2 years ago that I was, I got onto the hydrogen thing. I looked at it, but I was trying the products, and they just weren't working. And then the product that did work was the one you would trap it in the bottles, but it was just arduous. It was, and it didn't work nearly as good as this one does, but it still kind of got the ball rolling.
Yeah, it's same idea. Another guy that invented that tablet, and you need to trap it under pressure, right? Time and pressure to get it. Like I was mentioning, that's how we originally started our development, to make a better version of that. And it was the phenomena that we kept on witnessing, which is what our pending patent revolves around, of seeing this whiteout and these high levels of hydrogen when the water's turning white, because we know that if the water's white, that means the hydrogen isn't actually dissolved, right? So it's like, but how is it we're still testing it? And when we figured it out that, hydrogen, the molecule is around 120 pico, which, if for Americans with the metric scale, if you think of, like a micron, then there's a nano, which is 1,000 times smaller than a micron, and then a pico is 1,000 times smaller than the nano. So hydrogen is super small. Yeah. Well, we're creating one molecule of hydrogen at a time, which is the beauty of these tablets. Well, then we started finding this literature on how nano bubbles of gases will stay not dissolved, but don't dissipate, and just stay relatively stable in suspension. So we started figuring this stuff out, and then like testing, trying to falsify in every possible way to say, are we missing something? And when everything kept on pointing to what we're doing, we're, looking with lasers at the bubble size, saying that we're hitting a first peak of like 80 nanometers on the average size of the bubble. We're seeing all this stuff. And then we said, okay, what we need to do is figure out how to make the perfect flow of these bubbles. So the bubbles are as small as possible, so we can get as many of them dense packed into this cup of water, so people can just drop a tablet in a cup and a minute later drink it.
It's extraordinary. How many tablets of the Fastonic would someone have to take to get a benefit? I mean, a day?
Well, I mean, one. Probably.
One. Yeah, one. I take 2 a day. And if I, like you, if I do a really hard effort workout, I may take up to 4.
Yeah. So what I take a lot more. What I can say, like, say for my shoulder, pain, I find that taking about 4 a day gets rid of pain. I can sleep on my left shoulder, just kind of like a little bit slow. And on top of the arthritis, I basically, I got into a car accident not longer after, and it tore my labrum. So I have like partial tears throughout my rotator cuff and a labral tear. So my shoulder is all messed up. And hydrogen gets rid of the pain. I don't take anything else other than H2.
Can you take all 4 at once?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Personally.
I mean, I like to just get it done, and I like that shock because, like you, I notice an immediate impact.
It definitely it gives me like a boost of energy when I take all four.
Yeah.
Now, I'd recommend people try one.
Yeah,
I've been drinking hydrogen for 4 years, and I'm a big guy. I'm 250 pounds, so I want a bigger dose. My girlfriend, who runs marathons, she's like 115 pounds, give or take, and she finds like one tablet every other day gets rid of her hip impingement, which is common in female runners.
Wow.
So she doesn't need nearly as much as I do, and that's what I was going to say. I mean, one a day should be, good for most people. Some people might need 2. I need 4, and it really depends on the person's body, what they're doing.
I have, and this is totally anecdotal, but I've had 2 people that have high uric acid levels, gout, etc. And one of them, when they go on a fast, it flares up. When they do the Fastonic, 0. As a matter of fact, it's taken the gout completely away. I mean, it's just remarkable. I think that was it too, 2 a day. So. I mean, I can just speak clinically, I mean, it helps so much of the pain conditions, autoimmune obviously has such a regulatory effect on the immune system. And, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, it's one of those things that I love giving to people because I know there's always, this reaction. It's some dose anyway.
Yeah, no, for sure. I get anecdotals in all day long.
Yeah.
Like every day I get new ones in, and it always surprises me. And it's one of the things that we're donating and funding to a lot of public research. And I believe it's really important to donate to like public teams, especially because, they're the ones, it's one thing to pay a team, a few $100,000 to find the result that you want them to find, or to find public researchers who are truly interested in hydrogen, want to study their subject. And then what I do is I usually donate them, money to do extra tests so they get a better understanding of what's going on. So we have all sorts of these things. And every team who comes to me wants to study something different. And I say, yeah, absolutely. Because you hear all these anecdotals, but we also want to know what it does and how it does it and how it's going to benefit us so that we know better how to use hydrogen in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road.
It's one of the things I love about it. I mean, it is, you do get a lot of anecdotal evidence with the product, but there's science around it, and it's not being driven by one company. You said it best. Once you learn how to read studies, you realize that you can push a study in a direction you want to push, right? But with this, so many people are doing so many different studies, for different reasons and coming up, with at least one unified answer. The stuff works, man. So, listen, your creations in Fastonic, man. We appreciate it, no doubt about it. So, matter of fact, I'm going to take more today after this. I just get excited after I hear all these studies. God, I'm going to take more of it. Alex, thanks for being on the show. Honestly, I know, like I know our people love these shows because they love the next thing. But I'm very cautious about products that I do shows on because I don't want to watch a show 2 years later and be like, oh my God, I missed it on that. And but I can tell you, our mastermind group this weekend, I mean, some of the brightest minds of our industry, we all in agreement, man. This is here to stay. It's a real deal.
And it's great, for me seeing how this is going down, because when I was first interested in hydrogen years ago, nobody had ever heard of it.
Yeah.
And when all the studies are coming out of Japan and China and Korea, you really wonder, you're like, okay, well, nobody in North America, nobody who speaks my language is talking about this or has heard of this. Yeah. So now that more and more studies are coming out, more researchers in Europe and North America are studying hydrogen, more clinicians are advising with hydrogen, all these things, it really makes me feel happy about these 4 years of work that I've been putting in.
Yeah.
Path, because I'm like, for all the evidence here, I didn't get it wrong. We're learning more. The stuff is amazing, and it really puts a smile on my face.
Good job, man. Yeah. So it's been a pleasure having you on the show. And hey, if you have a breaking study and you want to bring it, we'll bring it on Cell TV, man. So
absolutely.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for being on. Gotcha.
Well, that's it for this week. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to check out getfastonic.com to take 10% off this groundbreaking molecular hydrogen supplement. And practitioners, just a reminder that it's not too late to join us in Vegas from November 2nd to the 4th, and you don't even have to travel. We are offering tickets to the live stream of our Live It to Lead It event. You can go to hcfevents.com for more information, and you can use the promo code CHTV to take 10% off. We'd love to have you join us. We'll be back next week and every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. We truly appreciate your support. You can always find us at podcast.drpompa.com. And please remember to spread the love by liking, subscribing, giving an iTunes review, and sharing the show with anyone you think may benefit from the information heard here. And as always, thanks for listening.